All right, welcome everybody to another edition of Legal Tech Week for October 21st, 2022. This is the weekly program where we talk about the top stories in legal tech and innovation. I'm Bob Ambrogi. I moderate this. I also have a blog called Law Sites and a podcast called Law Next, and even a legal tech directory called Law Next also. And we have a special guest panelist with us today, but before I introduce him, let's go around with our usual panelists and introduce yourselves. So, Joe, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I'll kick off the boring panelists. I'm Joe. I'm from.
I did not say that.
We all know what you meant. From Above the Law and Thinking Like a Lawyer. Yeah, happy to be here as always.
All right, Niki.
My name is Niki Black. I am the Senior Director of SME and External Education at MyCase, and I write legal technology columns for the Daily Record, Above the Law, ABA Journal, and sometimes other outlets. And I also write some reports on the MyCase side of things.
It's disconcerting that you changed your title because I'm still not used to it.
I know.
Is this the same Niki Black? I don't know.
Newer and better. No, it's the same.
Newer, better.
Same old boring Niki Black. So.
And Steve.
Hi, Steve Embry. I write the blog Tech Law Crossroads and do various and other sundry things. I am actually at a ABA law practice meeting in San Francisco, and hence the strange background and lights reflecting off my glasses that I can't seem to figure out how to stop. So I'll just have to look like I have a piercing glare.
Looks good. Looks like a nice hotel room.
It is. Yes, very nice.
And Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Wilkins, Editor-in-Chief of Legal Tech News at ALM, and I guess one of the new regular panelists.
I sort of twisted your arm into it, right? I just started inviting you as a regular rather than ever actually asking you, but you can always say no, so.
I'll join when I can, yes.
Okay.
I'm just happy that we now have a Stephanie and a Stephen. So
I know.
I think, Stephanie, you and I are now a voting block.
And we have glasses. We got Niki on our side with the glasses too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I've got glasses. One who is not wearing glasses today, but a special guest panelist today. Very happy to be joined by my former colleague at ALM way back in the day, David Horrigan. David, why don't you say hello and tell us a little bit about who you are?
Thanks very much, Bob. Great to be back with you. Yeah, more years than we care to remember. It's been about 20 years or so. I was a reporter for the National Law Journal when our leader here, Mr. Ambrogi, was the editor-in-chief. I am now the Discovery Counsel and Legal Education Director at Relativity, and I run Relativity CLE programs. And we're getting ready for our biggest one of the year, along with ALM's Legal Week and ILTACon. We have some people here on the broadcast who are going to be joining us for it. So really pleased to get to go back and be a journalist today and join the Legal Tech Week and talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing at Relativity Fest next week.
Yeah, and so what you're saying is you were a legitimate journalist before you went over to the dark side and sold out for the big bucks, but that
would be it. Yes, Bob. Yeah. Exactly. Those student loans had to be paid at some point.
That's okay. Yeah. So Joe, Stephanie, and I think that's it, right? Are all going to be at Relativity Fest next week, and I'm looking forward to it. It's actually my first time. I've somehow never been there. Well, I know how I've never been there because I've always had scheduling conflicts,
right?
Despite David trying to get me to go there for years now. So I'm really looking forward to it.
I too will be there, Bob.
Are you going, Steve?
Yep, I'm going too.
That's great.
I did not know that.
Hey,
yes.
Excellent.
Awesome.
David, you guys were kind enough to invite me, so I will be there.
I'm glad to hear that. That's great.
Well, maybe you can join because Joe and I were just talking before we started recording that we're gonna double team on some of the interviews like we've talked about doing at some of the other conferences. So if you want to join in on with us and some of the interviews we'll be doing there, maybe we can kill a bunch of birds with one stone, or however that works. But anyway, so before we kind of talk about our regular stories and stuff this week, I thought David, and David has to jump off in a few minutes because he's actually in the middle of a conference where he has to go jump on stage and do something, and he's going to come back after he does that. But before you do that, maybe you could just kind of give us a little bit of a preview from your perspective of what's happening at Relativity Fest next week.
Sure, that's great. It's going to be next Wednesday through Friday, October 26th through 28th. And it's different for us. First of all, we've been virtual for 2 years. We are now a hybrid conference. You can enjoy the experience that is Relativity Fest from the comfort of your home or office or live in Chicago. And we're all really excited about being back in Chicago. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about one of my favorite panels. It's the e-discovery State of the Union. And 2 of the regular panelists here will be on it. Bob, of course, will be on it, and Stephanie is going to be on it as well. And we're going to have some fun. Just about everyone in there is a lawyer, practicing or otherwise. Judge James Francis IV, a retired jurist from the Southern District of New York. I believe that was Counselor Patrice's home court when he was practicing back in the day. Judge Francis will be with us. He will be our judge for the program. We're going to have 2 sides, the lawyers and the journalists. Now, 2 of the 3 journalists are also lawyers, Stephanie and Bob, but they're going to be joined by Zach Warren, who, of course, is a member emeritus of the panel here on Legal Tech Week. And so that would be the journalist side. We've got Ambrogi, Wilkins, and Warren. Then for the lawyer side, we're going to have...
Warren's gone over to the dark side now.
Yeah, so exactly. A fellow sellout. Good for him. It's on the lawyer side, it's going to be Ryan O'Leary of IDC, Kenya Parrish-Dixon of Empire Technologies Risk Management Group, and Kelly Twigger, who has written for Joe's publication Above the Law before. She wears 2 hats. She has her own boutique e-discovery firm, ESI Attorneys, and she's also the CEO of her software company, eDiscovery Assistant, which I call LexisNexis and Westlaw for eDiscovery. So it's going to be a fun group, and both teams are playing for charity. Zach, Bob, and Stephanie are going to be playing for the Child First Fund. It's the foundation of the Chicago Public Schools. And Kenya, Ryan, and Kelly are going to be playing for the Legal Services Corporation. So the winning team will have a donation in their names, and Relativity's doing it, but it's part of the Discovery State of the Union going on there. And so we'll have some fun with that.
How do we get points? I don't even know how we get points. We'll have to figure
we're very generous with the points, Bob.
Okay.
Bob mentioned that I've got to step away for a second. And I'm here in sunny Detroit, Michigan, and it actually is sunny. It's a great day in Detroit today at the National Association of Women Judges. I'm giving some introductory remarks with 2 judges who are going to be discussing accountable language. And the National Association of Women Judges has a resolution this year to ask rulemakers to get rid of the term special master from the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. So it's a big issue going on right now. And so if you don't mind, I'm going to step away for a few minutes, give those opening remarks, and then head back and tell you more about Relativity Fest.
All right, great. We'll see you in a little bit, David.
Great, thanks.
All right, well, let's turn to some of the week's. I never think I've ever heard Counselor Patrice before. That has a ring to it. I like that.
I mean, I guess it's interesting. He was saying that was my home court, and Judge Francis was a magistrate on a case that lasted like 5 years of my career. So I'm very familiar with him.
It's funny. He was also the magistrate on the massive litigation. Then when I was a first, second, third year associate too.
Yeah, no, he's great.
Yeah. Well, apparently I wasn't paying attention to the rules of this panel we're on, Stephanie, because I didn't know anything about us earning points or that we were even a team. I didn't know that. But
I think you just snuck that in there.
It's 3.
I don't know. After hearing that, Bob, I may want to bet on the other teams.
I
think they've got the winning side.
It's 3-on-3 basketball. That's what I heard. So
yeah,
better start working on some plays.
Yeah,
I'm pretty tall. I'm good.
Yeah. All right. Well, the rest of the news all seems boring right now. But I thought I'd start.
How do you segue from that, Bob? I can't wait.
I know. How do I segue from that? Well, I can say it was a slam dunk for NetDocuments this week as they acquired Worldox. it seems like sort of the biggest story of the week from the legal in terms of the legal tech world. I don't know, if it's the sexiest or most exciting of stories, but pretty interesting to me. I thought just because I mean, Worldox is a pretty widely used document management system. It's one of the oldest out there. It's been out there for what, like 30 years or something. Still a lot of sort of legacy on-premises installs, but it went to the cloud a few years ago. And the NetDocuments, meanwhile, was a company that one of the earliest companies to kind of launch in the cloud back when everybody was saying, "What, are you crazy to be launching in the cloud?" And they struggled for a few years to really get traction, to really get law firms to feel confident with putting their documents up in the cloud, and yet now NetDocuments is really becoming a leading sort of powerhouse in the world of document management systems in law. So this acquisition of Worldox seems to be largely calculated to just basically increase their customer base. That seems to be the largest motivation for it. So not only does it help NetDocuments increase its customer base, but it's sort of one more nail in the coffin of on-premises software of any kind. I think it's just they're going to be moving slowly, not necessarily overnight or right away, but the goal is to eventually move all of the Worldox customers onto the NetDocs platform. So pretty significant on a lot of levels, I thought.
I thought it was really significant. It's especially in the larger context of the consolidation that's been happening across the board since the pandemic started, but really in the last year and a half, I would say there have been some pretty significant acquisitions that are really causing that. It's not really shrinkage of the market, but all this consolidation is resulting in, I wouldn't call them monopolies, but, there's in some ways sort of a reduction of options. But I think at the end of the day, at least right now, there's still enough options, and it's making it so that these platforms are pretty robust. But I thought it was super interesting. I didn't see this one coming, and I thought it was really interesting. And I think that the document management space is going to be an interesting one to watch because there aren't that many players anymore. So, and they're all trying to platformize too. So,
when I was writing up my thing, and actually I can't remember who I was talking to, but we were walking through the exhibit hall at ClioCon, and NetDocs had a booth, and whoever I was with said, "Why are they here?" And I said, "Well, they integrate with Clio," and she was like, "Yeah, but I mean, like that's not really who they work, who their base is," and that came rushing back to me as soon as this deal happened, because I was like, "Oh, that's why they're here, because they're about to have a bunch of customers." But
they have had customers from
oh, of course,
among smaller firms as well, and in the briefing several of us were at the media briefing when they were telling us about this. And I think they said they're pretty much in firms of five lawyers and up across the board. But again, clearly, as this is meant to increase their penetration in those sort of small to medium size range of firms. The other thing is, in terms of not being aware, I didn't see this coming either, although I was starting to think I was the only one who didn't, because as I've talked to people about it over the course of the week, several people have said, "Oh yeah, they've been working on this for a long time. They've been talking about this for a long time." So I don't know. So many of these deals I never hear about till they actually happen, or you hear rumors of them, but I hadn't even heard rumors of this one. Again, Josh Baxter, the CEO of NetDocuments, had said he had first approached Worldox in 2019, I think he said, about this. And from some of what I've heard since writing about it this week, that it, in fact, was sort of corroborated by other people who said that there had been some earlier pretty intense discussions, but they were put on the back burner because the owners of Worldox just weren't ready to sell at that point. And then it got
2019 is when I spoke to them before the pandemic, that they started to really target smaller law firms. And that was one of their big pushes at, I want to say Legal Week. I can't remember which conference it was, but I wonder if, I mean, that's interesting that that's when those conversations started too, with Worldox. And maybe that was part of that strategy of targeting smaller firms.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how it kind of plays out in terms of their customer service. You know, there's kind of a backlash I've heard from several places of customers who are saying, you know, these vendors, they acquire other vendors and they merge and they spend all their time worrying about integration with the two systems and all of that, and they're not giving us the same level of service that they used to. I don't know if that's true necessarily, but the fact that I've heard it for, you know, several places makes me think if it's not true, there's certainly that kind of perception out there. And, you know, NetDocs, and at least it's been my impression that they were very consumer service oriented, and had a very good system. So I hope the integration does not screw that up, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, we'll see on that. So let's see what else, what else do we want to talk about? Stephanie, you actually had an interesting story this week. It was actually something that we've kind of talked about this topic before, not you know, before you joined the panel, but you've got a different spin on it, or Cassandra. I think did Cassandra write the piece this week?
Isha.
But
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
the one was Isha.
oh, Isha, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I wasn't sure how much you all had discussed the metaverse and law in the past, but I was actually at the Women Influence and Power in Law conference earlier in the week too, and just the metaverse came up a lot, which there's just a lot of, you know, talk about it being the next big thing in legal. But then what Isha sort of uncovered is that these law firms have these offices and no one's using them, but they're still keeping them, and it's kind of becoming an educational thing. But it's sort of the question of why are they holding on to them? Will the metaverse actually eventually take off, and where are we going with this? How does it work? Will it work? Can it work?
yeah, we've talked about it. We talked about it more from the perspective of firms setting up offices in the
Yeah.
metaverse when they were first doing it, and not so much about then what happens with those offices after they set them up. So it is interesting that somebody thought to do a follow-up and see what's going on there, because it looks like not much is going on.
Yeah, but they're still keeping them. They're not giving them up, the people that have them. So I actually saw a discussion start on LinkedIn about it, and a lot of the takeaway I took from that was somebody I knew posted Isha's article, was that everyone's waiting for the right tech or the right app to actually make it usable. And who knows when that'll be, but they're sort of holding on to it in case or until that comes along.
Like parking a domain back in the day. Well, we still do that, or like a username, you know, trying to grab it across all the different platforms. So, I mean, I think that the forward-thinking firms are smart to be doing that, but I don't know about you guys, but I've considered like getting the virtual reality goggles or whatever. I don't even know what you call them, but like I've looked into it a bunch of times, and I just feel like the tech isn't quite there to want to invest in it and try it out. I'm also afraid I'll hurt myself. I don't know. I'm going to fall over and have to try to explain to everybody why I have a sprained ankle or hit my head on something, but it's just not quite there yet. So I think that's an interesting aspect of it too. And it's interesting that they raised that.
I've always been under the impression, Nikki, that you were really just an avatar on our screen.
Yeah.
You already inhabited the metaverse, you know.
I was like the person who's done nothing but talk about the metaverse since we started this show.
So I thought something was interesting though in the story, kind of actually it was like at the tail end of the story where was it the lawyer? Was it one of the lawyers that she talked to? Kind of said, you know, it's not even necessarily about getting clients there, but a little bit about just educating attorneys and others about the metaverse. And I thought that was an interesting point. I mean, you know, one of the things that we've talked about in terms of just tech competence in general for lawyers is you need to have an understanding of some of these different platforms, whether it's social media or the metaverse. in order to be able to advise clients about it. And so, there's something to be said for just being there, just to get it, just to understand it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and I was,
it was, go ahead, Stephanie, I'm sorry.
no, I was just going to say, I mean, it's sort of an elaborate way to go about educating, but
Yeah.
it's just, I mean, I was also at a round table, and it was a very weird round table in that a lot of it started with what even is, like, everyone's kids understood the metaverse, and some were even already profiting off of, like, they were selling shirts in the metaverse and getting, like, in Roblox and getting Robux for them. But at the same time, the adults in the room didn't even really know how it worked, but also they were convinced it was the future and we're all going to have to be in it one day.
Yeah.
At Clio, there was a judge who gave a talk. He was from Louisiana, and I can't remember his name, but I chatted with him afterwards.
Scott Schlegel.
Yeah, that was Scott. And he was showing me his digital courtroom, which is not exactly the metaverse, but it's not far from it. I mean, lawyers would come in and they'd be ushered to this waiting room, and where they could bump into each other, and then Zoom would pick up and they would see each other and they could chat. And then when their case was called in front of him, they would maneuver over to the bench with these little avatar kind of things. And when they got to the bench, they would all appear together on Zoom. And, I thought it was really kind of fascinating as I was watching this, and I was thinking, that's, if there is a judge that's going to start having court in the metaverse, I bet it will be him.
I was just going to say, I feel like the metaverse reminds me of, in some ways, how AI has functioned, going back a decade or so. There's a bunch of hype about it, mostly overselling what it can do. However, there are killer applications of it that are boring, and so people aren't doing them yet, but those will eventually take over, and then the metaverse will get rolling. When it stops being, we're going to all have avatars, because, I think we all agree that avatars are stupid. She's not even listening. But
hey, watch it. You're going to insult Niki.
No, right. But all of these, like Mark Zuckerberg dancing around and trying to meet people, that's all going to go away. And it's going to become something very simple, like, shopping with a virtual shelf, so it's easier to browse than it is currently. It's going to be something like that, very mundane, but very central to our lives long term.
Well, you guys, I think several of us went to that virtual conference where we had avatars, and of all the virtual conferences I went to,
conference.
The Mary Mac, that was the most realistic, and that was semi-metaverse, I think. I mean, we weren't wearing goggles, and we were, on flat screens, so it wasn't 3D. But again, it's like a gradual move, and so I think Joe's right. I think it'll be gradually, and then all of a sudden it'll be everywhere.
I think
the motorboat was the best part of that one.
Right, that was so much fun. So people slide off the back into the water when they stand up. Or when people
David, we're talking about the metaverse and lawyers.
Oh, great! Yeah.
But the
what about e-discovery?
Concept of metaverse and virtual realities, all the sci-fi that I watch and read about that kind of segues a little bit into what I was going to talk about, because I was actually going to bring some of that stuff up. You don't have to segue into mine now. I can.
Wait a minute. It's my job to do the segueing here.
I don't have to talk about it now, but it is.
First they changed your title, and now she's taking over the segueing. I don't know.
I don't have to talk about it now.
No.
Okay. Well,
now we have to.
And when you first see the article that I picked, it's not going to necessarily make sense, but it was definitely part of what I'd planned to talk about. And when I covered it, or spoke about it, but I can't get it posted in there. I always mess up, but it's essentially an article that talks about how there's Uber plans to advertise at every single stage of your ride using your own data. So basically, and apparently Lyft is doing the same thing. They've both hired like large advertising units within their companies, and they're going to start trying to monetize even further by just constantly advertising to you in the app from the start to the finish, and possibly even, from the minute you decide to hail a ride you know, and then you're waiting and you're getting all your notifications. So you're looking at your phone every time you get them. There's going to be ads. And then also they may start doing like what you see in taxis in New York City, putting, you know, tablets in the taxis to continue to advertise to you. And the advertising is going to be partly based on where you're going. You're going to a bar, fine, they'll tell you all about the latest drinks. But so to me, that's just part of this slippery slope that we're heading down. That's like a Black Mirror episode. I mean, they're kind of, this is them trying to like make Black Mirror reality. You know, you see some of these virtual reality or implanted chip or contacts in people's eyes and Black Mirror, where everywhere they go, they see advertisements in front of them specifically for their unique needs that pop up just sort of virtually in their real reality, or if they're in virtual reality, just everything's an advertisement everywhere. And it feels like we're heading down this like slippery slope, both in just terms of advertising, but even in terms of like how everything's becoming software based. So vehicles, you know, BMW had announced that in some countries where it's permissible, they're going to start, there's all these software features they can turn on and off, like heated seats. You know, they're going to start charging for these additional features that are already included right now. But our whole lives are becoming compartmentalized, controlled by software, controlled by the user, the data that they gather about you. And which is one way or another, everything's getting piecemealed and compartmentalized, and they're trying to make as much money off of us in every single possible way they can, using all this, these capabilities that were not there before the virtual reality, computers, you know, geolocation tracking. So it's a little alarming. And this was to me an example of that.
Yeah, I read the article that you had sent around before we started this, and it's sounds horrifying to me, but I completely agree with you. And I just saw someone in the comments say that it reminds me of the movie WALL-E with the people. And that is exactly in the roundtable I was in about the metaverse. That's exactly what people said too. Everyone is just sort of, it is Black Mirror, it's WALL-E. It's just this idea of, I'm just picturing myself stuck in traffic on an hour-long Uber ride to the airport with ads constantly bombarding me, and that just sounds terrible.
I've always felt like those dystopian views of there's 1,000,001 ads plastered everywhere don't do enough credit to advertisers. I feel like advertisers are smart enough not to bombard you constantly. Like, it won't be a constant bombardment, which may well be more evil, don't get me wrong, but it's not going to be that you're like plastered with stuff. It's going to be subtle and tailored, and they're going to find ways to make it not be obtrusive, because that's the whole advertising art, is that they've gotten really good at that.
Joe, they've got to move from the art to the science, though, because there's a conference all of us have attended. It is put on by the former employer of Bob and me and the current employer of Stephanie. Those ads in the elevators at the Hilton at Legal Week. You are trapped there. You do not want to be there. You're running late for a meeting. And then that unfortunate vendor who's paid a lot of money to be on those elevator ads. My, oh my.
That's fair.
And also, this is kind of what I was going to say about the Uber thing too. I mean, just like if it's Uber, say Budweiser is advertising on Uber, Budweiser is not, they're not trying to be strategic about how often you see their ad. Uber is putting it in your face. That elevator is putting it in your face, not the company that paid for the ad.
Just to be a little contrary on this, I mean, aren't we just talking about the fact that it's going to be in their app and you don't have to sit there and stare at your app for the whole car ride? I mean, you could look out the window or check your email or something. I mean,
New York
isn't that
One
where
and
the
New
ads
York
are going
City
to be?
cabs is kind of cool.
Well, but I'm like checking it. Where is this person? How far away are they from where I am now? Do I have to be ready to jump in? Do I have to be ready to look for the license plate? Are they going where they say they're going, or are they going to drive off somewhere and, kill me and I'll never be seen again? Like, maybe you guys aren't doing that on the ride.
That might be a woman thing, Niki. I don't know if they all do that.
Yeah, I think women do that.
is maybe the bigger concern of what they're doing with all this data, which maybe they're already collecting anyway. But so Niki's on her way to a bar, and now we've got that in our database about Niki, and now she's heading off to who knows where, and now we've got that in our database about Niki. And
okay, I think I'm a little offended by that, Bob. Who knows where she's going now?
No. Your database is much better than some other people's, I'm sure. But I mean, in a way, if I guess that's what I'm saying. I mean, they're probably tracking all that already anyway. But if they are then tracking it and somehow making it available to advertisers or somehow using that to target advertising, it just starts to seem that more intrusive. And again, where does that data eventually end up? Is that data getting sold? How is it getting sold? I mean, those are some of the concerns. And is the subject to an e-discovery request at some point? We can talk about that at Relativity Fest. All right. Well, so from at one extreme, lawyers going into the metaverse and getting hijacked in their Uber rides, to the other extreme of lawyers having to get hijacked back into the office, I guess. Joe, you've got a story this week on that reoccurring topic.
Yeah. So office time. Everyone coming out of the pandemic, there was we had an instance where everyone thought there would be problems with business, and we thought recessions and economic collapse, and instead law firms were the most profitable they've ever been, largely because of the work of people on this panel and in the audience. Legal tech wins, yay. But we set up a system where people were able to seamlessly do their jobs from anywhere. What happened on the back end of that is the associates on whose backs all of that profit happened did not want to go back to the office. And some of the firms, the smart ones anyway, looked and, well, more, maybe not just the smart ones who didn't have much time left on their leases, also said, hey, we can cut some floor space here. And they've started pitching hybrid work models. This now has become so prolific that at least among big law, you're hard pressed to find anybody who expects people to be back in the office 5 days a week. 3 days, 4 days, these models are all being talked about. So that's the lay of the land. I'm one of those people who thinks that people do need to be in the office at least occasionally, mostly because I think that there's no way I would have learned anything as a lawyer if it weren't for what I call soft learning of screwing up in front of a third year who goes, wait a minute, why are you doing that? Something that can never be really controlled. That said, you don't have to be there 5 days. Anyway, this is all prelude to my article this week, which is that Ropes and Gray, there are some other firms that are doing this too, Skadden and whatever, so I don't want to just pick on Ropes and Gray. But Ropes and Gray is there's a lot of unhappy people there who are very eager to write above the law because Ropes and Gray has taken the stance that we have a 3-day in the office work week, and that means you must be here Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, which struck me as missing all the point. It assumes that what people wanted was 4-day weekends, which isn't really from my conversations, what anybody who wants a hybrid model cares about. What they care about is the flexibility of, something came up, I can't make it in Wednesday, don't worry, I'll come in Thursday. That's the kind of world that they want. So this mandatory Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is not helping anybody. On top of that, I have since heard from more people who say that Ropes and Gray is leaning into it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but you also are encouraged to show up to office hours. Those are only held Mondays and Fridays in like this weird teasing of getting everyone back 5 days, which seems like it misses the point as far as the associates and by extension recruiting, because it blows past all the flexibility as though they don't understand it. They just want to say they have a 3-day week for recruiting purposes and then fail to get all the advantage. But it also hurts them. I mean, maybe they're locked into a bunch of leases, but long term, the advantage is going to be hoteling and not having your office be a ghost town Monday and Friday and totally full Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's about being 75% full every day is really where you want to be. So I just thought it was a weird, poor strategy, but one that I fear we're going to see a lot more of. And those of us who are in this space, I know that Bob and I at least went to a demo a while back about a company that's very much about helping offices manage you're going to distribute your workforce across the floor multiple different days. How do you do that? How do you hotel effectively? Maptician. And I think that's the future. But
yeah. It wasn't part of the implication.
Jump in here real quick.
Go ahead.
Yeah, let me jump in quick because I'd actually done a piece on a couple of surveys, one that Clio did and one the ABA did, And they came up, at least in this area, with remarkable similar statistics. I mean, the people want to work remotely, A, and B, people, almost everybody that works remotely says, I get just as much done working remotely as I do in the office.
Right.
And so now you've got all these people who want to work from home, want to work remotely, maybe from home or Starbucks or wherever, think they can do just as well there. And then along comes the employers who say, we don't care what you think, get your butt back down to the office. And the worry that a lot of these people have is that the legal market there'll be a downturn and there won't be as much demand for legal services. And the law firms, senior management will then be able to better demand that they come back to the office. And the ABA survey that shows that this is particularly a concern with women and people of color, because they're afraid if they don't, whatever the policy is, if they don't go back to the office, they're going to be deemed not committed. And again, horrible for somebody that wants to be a partner if you're not committed, God forbid. And the other piece of it is, as you put it, Joe, well, the argument is be in the office so you can get trained. And yes, there's some soft training goes on, but too many law firms, that's all there is the soft training. So your soft training probably would come from a partner that was the same color as you are and had generally the same background. And women and people of color, they don't get that same exposure, and so they don't get as trained as you might get. And now they're not only not committed, but they're also not good lawyers. So we really want to improve our diversity numbers, but darn, we can't figure out how to do it. So I think all these things are playing into this new normal that we have, and I fear if firms get too demanding on coming back to the office, there could be a mass exodus of people who just say, I'm tired of this. I don't want to do this anymore.
And I'll just throw one quick thing in, which is that's a great point about the ways in which different biases interact on training. But it's also, I also think that as bad as being in the office is for that, it's demonstrably better than the hybrid situation, because in hybrid, you actually have to take affirmative steps to hit a button to talk to the person and engage in that learning. Right. I do remember somebody walking by me screwing something up and going who wasn't even in my chain of command, basically just walked by and was like, why are you doing what you're doing right now? And that sort of thing, that can happen in an office. But when I feel like hybrid creates a lot of team-based silos, at least from my conversations with people. And when you're in those silos, it kind of reifies all of the bias problems that you're talking about, because you're just in that group.
Yeah, I think what has to happen is most law firms have no formal training per se, right? You come in and you're just kind of thrown in and you go to work. I think if you want people to be trained in the future, you're going to have to say, we're going to have a formal training program. Everybody gets the same basic training program, and it's going to be every Tuesday at 3 o'clock. You need to be in the office to go through it. It's going to be that kind of thing, because I don't know that a lot of the younger lawyers are saying we don't ever want to go to the office. I think what they're saying is we don't want to go to the office to do the same things that we do at home, right? Be on Zoom calls, right?
Another thing with when it comes to women, people of color, and also people with disabilities that I don't think is talked about enough, but it has been raised when talking about remote work. And that's that for those people, they encounter microaggressions, or when it comes to people with disabilities, they also encounter hurdles to actually functioning in an office setting that they don't encounter when they're home. So for a lot of people, the pandemic and remote work became those silos that were created were actually comfortable cushions for them, because their interactions oftentimes were not as pleasant as the interactions of white men with other white men, which often, there isn't as much friction, or there aren't as many microaggressions. So I think there's something to be said about that too. That's another reason some parts of the population don't want to return to the office at all or as frequently.
I was going to say something very similar, that I had seen, articles and research about the fact that especially people of color, the remote work sort of anonymized it. So it wasn't as I mean, people just looked more at the quality of the work and less at who was necessarily doing it or any of the, it sort of leveled the playing field for some people.
On Stephanie's leveling the playing field point, it was interesting because we were, I was a remote employee. Luckily, it's going on 8 years ago when I went to work for Relativity. They said I could stay in Boston. So I was the remote person. I was one of Relativity's first remote employees. Now, after the pandemic, almost the entire company is gone remote. So on that anonymization thing, you know, they were all there in the conference room in Chicago, and there's Horrigan over on the side on the Jumbotron, and you miss the nuances, you miss the sidebars, you miss a whole lot. So from an inclusion standpoint, for the people who are already remote, this is heavenly inclusion.
I just one other point on all this before we leave it, because I thought this really caught my eye with the ABA survey. They asked women, people of color, and people with disabilities, and maybe LGBT people, what percentage of them had insulting and suffered through insulting and demeaning comments when they went to the office. And in each case, it was over 20 to 25% of them had, which sort of makes me, oh, okay, so you want me to come back to the office so you can like insult me? Okay, good. What fun.
Hey, I was the associate in a room full of men that had to clean up and get coffee. No joke. Mid-level associate. And you don't have to do that when you're on Zoom.
It's crazy. Maybe I was reading between the lines a little bit of your story, Joe, but I also thought that you were and maybe you said this, but kind of making the point of like whatever happened to just respecting the professional independence of professionals. I mean, if I need to be out of the office for the day, you know, in pre-hybrid working days, if you needed to be out of the office for a day, you wouldn't ask permission. You would just do it. I mean, you manage your time, you manage your cases, you manage your clients, and you don't have to be, you know, I don't know, you shouldn't have to be answerable to somebody for where you are physically.
By the way, there's another between the lines in there that I'm glad you reminded me of, because what you would do is you wouldn't ask permission, but you know what you would do? You would tell your secretary who was there to tell everybody who might need you, hey, he's out. Now, law firms have gutted the administrative assistant pool, like early retirements right and left. 3 partners are sharing with 10 associates, 1 secretary sort of situation. It's just not what it was. When I was sharing with 2 other associates, if I was out, I would call, say, hey, I'm going to be out. Here's why. Here's how people can reach me. And that was enough.
Yeah. You know, I think part of it is it's, and I saw a story this week. I think it was in somebody at law.com was talking about that. Part of it is, you know, the older lawyers have this attitude that, well, I went through it, so you should go through it too. I was in the office every day, so you should be in the office every day. And it just, you know, and the other piece is you should be in the office so I can make sure you're working. And at least particularly in large firms, what you're really saying to that person is, okay, so you went through undergraduate school, you excelled, you made really good grades, you took the LSAT, you scored really well, then you went to law school and you worked really hard and you're top of your class, but yet I'm concerned that when you actually get out and get a job and are competing to be a partner in a law firm and make millions of dollars, that you're really not going to work very much. And I better watch you.
Right. It's 100%. It's the whole idea of FaceTime and why back in pre-pandemic, law firms were so opposed to any remote work as it was. They were checking the box. They were checking on you. I mean, even it is absolutely not giving you any sort of professional trust. And while I agree that there's value to being in the office sometimes, this mandated certain days a week schedule goes completely back to that lack of trust, just pure FaceTime requirement in my mind.
Well, and as
I can remember.
Well,
go ahead, Niki. I'm sorry. I've talked enough.
Well, mine's really short. As I've oft repeated, part of that FaceTime requirement is it comes from the egos of the partners who want to have somebody there to watch over to make themselves feel important, or want to belittle somebody to make themselves feel important or feel better. So that's often part of what contributes to that too, I think.
When I was a young lawyer, I can remember there used to be this kind of halfway humorous, tongue-in-cheek guide about how to be a good associate. And one of the things it said was like, if you're going to leave before like 6 or 7 o'clock, make sure you have a file open on your desk, a pen open with the tip off of it, and also make sure you have a full cup of coffee sitting there, because like nobody would ever leave a full cup of coffee.
Well, I will say on that point about the partners want to boss people around, the partnership survey that came out this week, one aspect of it that I thought was very interesting was the junior partners are very interested in hybrid work. So it might be a generational thing where the senior partners want people around to boss around, and the junior partners don't care as long as they make enough money.
We mentioned the legal trends survey, Steve, but wasn't the legal trends survey? It was only like half of lawyers don't want to go back into the office. I mean, it was something like 49% don't want to go back in the office, but 51% actually do want to go back in the office. I thought that was a really surprising finding, if I'm remembering the right survey off the top of my head. But
I think you're muted, but I'll throw in right beforehand that a survey of incoming, yeah, you are incoming, no, Steve was, incoming first years also disproportionately want to go to the office because they're like, we have no idea what we're doing. So like they are very much wanting to come back.
Yeah, and I think if you read down through the survey about it, it was a question, how often do you think you ought to be in the office, and how much do you want to work remotely? And so I think 44% might have been saying we want to be in the office all the time, or we don't want to be in the office at all. But then when you start breaking it down 1, 2, 3 days, the numbers start fluctuating a little bit.
Yeah. All right. Well, we can jump back to Relativity Fest in a second, get a little more from David about that, or you can talk about the judges panel you were just talking about. But I did want to also just mention one other big story this week I thought was kind of notable was the Hello Divorce investment. Just a really interesting company, raised another, what was it, 3 million or so in further seed capital. But with the goal of this raise being to kind of expand out the spectrum of services they're offering in the divorce ecosphere, so to speak, so that recognizing that a divorce doesn't end with the divorce decree, that there are all sorts of financial and real estate related and other kinds of implications that happen as a result of a divorce. And so they're going to be trying to expand now out into providing a broader range of services to support people who go through a divorce, not just in the sort of the strict legal part of it, but the other aspects of it, which I think it's a recognition that you're seeing in other sort of consumer facing legal tech companies, that the implications of a legal problem often go well beyond just the legal part of it that we tend to think about as lawyers, and that there are social and psychological and financial and other aspects to all of these things. So I thought that was really interesting. David, got a few minutes left. Do you want to?
Sure, yeah.
The floor is yours. You could tell us a little more about Relativity Fest, or if you want to talk about this issue you were just talking about with the judges panel. It also sounds interesting.
Yeah, I mean, they're in there discussing it right now. Judge Gunderson and Judge White, who also serves as the president of the National Association of Women Judges, are talking about accountable language. And, we talked before I had to step out about the special master renaming. They're going to go into the little nuances of legal opinions as well. And, one of the things I said in my opening remarks was, I can remember there was a sea change between undergrad and grad school on one side and law school on the other. And that is when I was an undergrad and grad school, the pronoun gender always deferred to the masculine. And you'll recall in school, Ms. Mulberry was there saying, that's the rule. The number in the subject has to agree with the predicate. So if you don't know, you got to default to the masculine. But when I got to law school, go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say Ms. is already pretty progressive. Like you were already there.
There you go. But no, in law school, all the textbooks defaulted to the feminine. It was she everywhere. And I thought that was really interesting. But segueing from from those judges to the judges we'll be seeing next week. Before the break, I already told you about the State of the Union. We're looking forward to having Bob and Stephanie on that one, and Joe will be there as well. Joe is going to be our panelist from the audience, and I am sure the acerbic wit of Patrice will make it even more fun. But the judicial panel, we're going to do something new. I shouldn't probably mention this on Legal Tech Week, but we are probably going to have less e-discovery on the judicial panel than we've ever had. We started this 9 years ago, and I've been fortunate enough to be the moderator for all 9 years, and it's usually pretty e-discovery heavy. This one, we have a theme of confidentiality v. transparency in the law. We're not going to debate the merits of Dobbs, but we are going to talk about the leaked draft opinion. And we're going to get perspectives from state and federal courts. Our lineup is Senior U.S. District Judge Nora Berry Fisher from the Western District of Pennsylvania, the Honorable William Matthewman, I should say, Magistrate Judge from the Southern District of Florida, the Honorable Tanya R. Kennedy, who is in New York as an appellate jurist in the First Division, Appellate Division, First Department, I should say. And we've also got Master Victoria McLeod coming from the United Kingdom, and she'll give us the European...
Will she still be called Master? That's the question.
Well, it's very interesting that you mentioned that, because she has requested to be called judge. And this is a tough one for me, because I want to make sure it's on the slides blasted on the Jumbotron, because I don't want somebody in the audience from the UK thinking, well, those bloody Americans, they don't know anything about UK law. They're calling them judges. But I'm going to honor the judge's request. So she will be Judge McLeod, and then we'll have U.S. District Judge Xavier Rodriguez. So we'll talk about Dobbs. We'll talk about the attorney-client privilege. We're going to talk about the overuse or underuse. I think most people think it's overuse of protective orders. We will get into e-discovery for a bit, because they're sealing everything. And so Judge Matthewman specifically is going to jump in first on what's going on with all these protective orders. And, then there's on the other side, there's the data privacy considerations. So we're looking forward to another great judicial panel. We'll have the international panel. We're going to have 6 nations on it this year. There'll be South Africa, there will be Australia, Germany, Ireland, and the UK on that one. We're going to, in our closing, the opening keynote is something, it's the product topics that a lot of time that you discuss on Legal Tech Week. So, we'll be talking about the latest and greatest in relativity. The closing keynote, though, on Friday is going to be Timnit Gebru, and you may have heard of her. She was the Google engineer who either resigned, or she argues she was terminated after discussing and publishing on gender bias and AI. So this dovetails into the conversation that we were having earlier on the discrimination that we see in all over society, and the law is certainly no exception. So she's going to talk about ethical AI. She's going to sit down with our CEO, Mike Gamson, and she's going to talk about her experience and what we need to do to take the biases out of artificial intelligence. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And I could go on and on. There are tons and tons of sessions, and you can look them up at relativityfest.com. We'd love to have you in Chicago. But if you need or want to stay home, tune in remotely. We're looking forward to it.
See, it's a little like Uber. Now we have advertising on the,
right,
on the programs.
Whoops. See, the sellout guy, the former journalist, is putting those corporate plugs in there.
If only Relativity had paid me for this. No, we are not. Yeah. We are not. This is not an ad-supported program yet. Although, if you're out there and you want to support us, we'll take your money.
I think the Google engineer. I was at a South by Southwest conference a few years ago, and there was a panel. It was 2 men and a woman, and one of the men was Walter Isaacson, the famous author. And so they talked and they talked and they talked, and they blah 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 blah. And at the end of it, a woman got up, and there was questions from the audience, and she got up. This woman got up and went to the microphone, and she said, "Mr. Isaacson and Mr. Smith, do you guys realize that you have interrupted Ms. Jones far many more times than she ever interrupted you?" And somebody said, "Well, who is that?" And she was employed by Google, so I think it may be the same person. There was this kind of gasp in the audience that, "Oh yeah, she's right."
Hey, Joe, thank you for putting Judge Matthewman, your article from Relativity Fest about Judge Matthewman on there. And by the way, I would be remiss if I didn't mention opening up on Wednesday of Relativity Fest, Beer and Basics. My colleague Janice Holman and I came up with this program years ago, and like, what's introductory level stuff at Relativity Fest? And Janice is like, there isn't. I'm like, why? And the theory is, if you are at these conferences, you're probably a power user. I'm like, there's a lot of stuff that people are afraid to ask because they don't want to look like they don't know what's going on. And that's what got behind Beer and Basics. It's free beer and wine, as the name suggests. I'm waiting to see if the CLE authorities give us any pushback on that. But it's going to be a fun program. Professor Bill Hamilton from the University of Florida, Go Gators, will be there. And he's going to have his boxes. If you talk about technology assisted review and AI, we're lawyers, not statisticians. And so with a lot of the stuff, it just is like trying to look through soup. Well, Bill takes boxes to explain precision and recall and the richness of the data. And so it is a really, really fun thing. So hope you'll, not only for the free drinks, but stop by Wednesday to see that.
And is the Dobbs panel going to reveal who it was who leaked the Dobbs decision? Are we going to find that out?
In the stuff that we submitted for CLE, I included one of David Latt's articles where he was playing sleuth, trying to figure out who it was.
You guys had a post on that today, right, Joe?
Yeah, we did. CNN posted today with a, whatever happened to that investigation? And I was like, yeah, what did happen to that? Because, I mean, obviously, those of us who understand Occam's razor understand that Ginny did it, so they don't want to say that. But yeah, so we did write a little thing about that. But yeah, it's a thing. All right, yeah, I guess we're coming to the end. I won't wax about Dobbs.
Oh, you can wax about Dobbs. I don't care. You may be alone because most of us are leaving in a few minutes. Yeah. So, well, I guess Niki, you're the only one we're not going to see next week. Then you're going to have to come to Relativity Fest.
I was invited, I think, virtually, and I almost reached out to attend in person when I looked over my schedule, but then I didn't.
Oh,
But
darn.
it sounds like it's
We would that I think that invitation was for either. I think that
It might have been. I can't remember.
Yeah, I think they knew that you couldn't come in person, but if your schedule changes, please come.
But yeah, no, I had no doubt probably if I reached out, I could have gone, but I hear a lot of great things about it, and it sounds like a really fun conference. And I was lamenting that because of Legal Week getting moved, I wasn't going to see the rest of you for a while after the Legal Awards night. And so we're going to have a long sort of bunch of months, you guys. What are we going to do?
No, it's going to be a dry spell. Well, you could get one of those audience panelist things that Joe has. I've never heard of that before, but that sounds like a good gig.
I have the answer, Niki. Metaverse.
Yeah.
But that's why
actually,
I wanted to hang out with you guys. But it sounded like a great conference. But
the comments said the same thing. And yes, and and we will also do the show, and that brings us to how this show can be our replacement.
For like 4 months, though. That's a long time.
Okay.
What am I going to do without you guys? Like hanging out in person now that we can do that.
We'll have to come up to your lake house, watch the leaves turn. All right. Well, I'm not sure we'll do this next week. I don't know. I'm traveling Friday. I don't know about other people. Maybe traveling Friday too.
I'm running. I am literally running a debate tournament. So
you're running a debate tournament. So
Go
probably
Army.
Next Friday will be a week off for Legal Tech Week, but we can all be back the week after. At which point we can report on what we heard and saw at Relativity Fest and talk about whatever else happens between now and then in the world of legal tech.
And Bob and team, thank you for letting me crash the party. It's been fun.
Yeah, it's good to have you, David. And we'll do it again sometime. So.
Great.
All right. Well, that does it for this week. Thanks to all of the panelists. Thanks to everybody in the audience for attending. Everybody stay well.
Good weekend.
Have a good weekend.
Yeah.
Bye.